Okay, we're going to go over the problems that were on your CFA, oversaw the linear inequalities. This was the first CFA over it, and then there will be a retake. So I wanted to give you this video for you to have, so you can look back at it to see how to work these problems if you have forgotten. Okay, the one thing I would personally do is this don't call me after midnight. I would write that down each time. Okay, let's go through and follow the steps. The first step is to see if you need to do the distributive. Well, we do have a parenthesis, so we can do the distributive. So that would be to multiply what's in front of the parentheses times everything on the inside. So that is going to give me a negative 8n plus 24 plus 1 is less than 89. Okay, you really have to watch the signs when you multiply. Okay, for the next step, I am going to combine these like terms. So that's this step, combine like terms. So I'm going to have a negative 8n plus 25 is less than 89. Now the next one, the m, means to move all variables to the same side. Well, we don't have that step here, so we're going to skip it. And we're going to move to this one, which is to do the inverse of add or subtract. So I'm going to subtract 25 from both sides. And so I'm going to bring down the 8n is less than, and then 89 minus 25 gives me a 64. And my last step is to do the inverse of multiplication or division here. And so I'm going to do that by dividing both sides by a negative 8. Now, when you divide both sides by a negative, you need to reverse the inequality sign. And then 64 divided by a negative 8 is a negative 8, because a positive divided by a negative is a negative. So this would be your final answer to problem number 1. Okay, let's go to problem 2. Problem 2, we are going to follow the same steps as we did for problem 1. So here we go. We're going to start off with the distributive. Okay, so for the distributive, I'm going to multiply what's in front times everything on the inside. That gives me a negative 15x plus 18 is greater than or equal to 93. All right, next we are going to do the inverse of combining like terms. Well, it just happens to be we cannot combine these. Those are not like terms. Well, the m is to move all the variables to the same side. Well, we have an x on this side of the inequality sign, but we don't have one over here. So we skip that step. So we're here, and we're going to do the inverse of add or subtract. So I'm going to subtract 18 from both sides. That cancels. I bring down the negative 15x, which is greater than or equal to 75. All right, now we're going to the next step, which is to do the inverse of multiplication or division. So this is multiplication. So I'm going to do the inverse, and I'm going to divide by a negative 15. And, oh, almost messed up. When I divide both sides by a negative, I have to reverse my inequality sign, and then this is a negative 5. So I get x is less than or equal to a negative 5. Really be careful with that, because obviously I was not careful enough, and it almost got me all messed up. Okay, let's now go to problem 3. Okay, so let's look over here at the steps. The first step is to do the distributive. So let me see if there's a parentheses. And there is, and right in front of the parentheses is a minus. So I'm going to put that understood 1, and that's what I'm going to distribute. So I have 2x minus 28 that I'm just going to bring down, a greater than or equal to. I'm going to bring down on the negative 7, and now I'm going to distribute. And a negative 1 times a positive 1 is a negative 1, and a negative 1 times a negative 7x is a positive 7x. Okay. We're now on the step to combine like terms. Well, on this side of the inequality here, I cannot combine those because one has an x and one doesn't. But on this side, I can combine these two because they don't have an x. So I'm just going to bring this down. And a negative 7 minus 1 is a negative 8. And then I'm going to bring down the plus 7x. All right, now we're going to move to the next step. And the following step says we're going to move all variables to this same side. I personally like to move the smaller variable, but you don't have to. So 2x is smaller than 7x. It's a positive 2x, so I'm going to subtract 2x from this side, and I'm going to line it up with the 2x over here. Now I'm going to bring down the negative 28 and bring down the negative 8, and then 7x minus 2x is a positive 5x. Okay, so now it's time to do the inverse of adding or subtracting. And so when I look over on the side with the x, I'm going to see what's being added or subtracted over there. Well, it isn't the 5 because this is 5 times x. So I want to move this negative 8. So to move a negative 8, I'm going to add 8 to this side and to this side. So a negative 28 plus 8 is a negative 20. Those cancel, and I bring down the 5x. And my last step here is to do the inverse of multiplication or division. This is multiplication, so I'm going to divide both sides by 5. Those cancel, giving me x. And then a negative 20 divided by 5 is a negative 4. Now, I can leave it like this, or I can flip it all to put my exponent, not my exponent, excuse me, my variable first. If I put it first, then I need to flip that sign and then put the negative 4. So I would have accepted either of these answers. Okay, let's go to the next problem. Okay, the next problem that you had was problem 4. So let's do that one. Once again, if we're following, don't call me after midnight. Okay, so here we go. The first thing that I'm going to do on this problem is the distributive. So here's the parentheses. So I am going to multiply the negative 5 times everything on the inside. So I bring down the 1. A negative 5 times a is a negative 5a. A negative 5 times a negative 4 is a positive 20. And then I just bring that side down because I do not have a parentheses there. And be careful to bring down on the negative sign with it. Okay, now I'm ready to do the next step, which is to combine like terms. Guys, it just helps to look at this list so you don't get confused. So over here, let's see if I can combine any like terms. Well, I can, because this is a number all by itself, and this is a number by itself. So I'm going to bring down this minus 5a, and 1 plus 20 is 21. and then I'm going to bring everything here down too. All right, the next step is to do the inverse of, or not the inverse, excuse me, it's to move the variables to the same side. So I have a negative 5a and I have a negative 7a. Once again, I like to move the smaller one. And this one is smaller than that one. You don't have to do it that way, but it tends to give you a positive variable if you do the inverse of the smaller one. Like this. The inverse of a negative 7a is to add 7a. So I'm going to add it here, and then I'm going to come over here under the a, because those are like terms, and I'm going to add 7a here. Sorry, that's adding. So a negative 5a plus 7a is 2a. Going to bring down the plus 21, the inequality sign. Those cancel, and then I just have a 7 here. Okay, now it's time to do the inverse of adding or subtracting. So I am going to do the inverse of adding, and I'm going to subtract 21 from both sides. That cancels. I'm just going to, oops, let's bring that down too much. Bring down that 2a. And 7 minus 21 is a negative 14. And last but not least, my last step is to do the inverse of multiplication or division. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2. And I get a is less than or equal to a negative 7. And that is my answer there. Okay, 2 more problems and we'll be done. So let's look at this one. Okay, this is problem 5, and we once again want to follow our same steps. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the inverse of the distributive. Well, when I look at this problem, I don't have the distributive property because I don't have anything in a parentheses. So I'm going to skip that. So I'm going to see if I can combine any like terms on either side of the inequality sign. And I can over here. Those are like terms. So I'm just going to bring down a negative 6 is greater than or equal to n over 5. And a negative 15 plus 4 is a negative 11, or minus 11. Okay, for the next step, I'm sorry, that was this step here. So now I have to move the variables to the same side. Well, this is the only side with an n, so I don't do that. So I can skip that step. So now I'm going to do the inverse of adding or subtracting. So over here on the side with the variable, the inverse of subtracting 11 is to add 11. So I'm going to add it here and here. So I'm a negative 6 plus 11 is 5, a positive 5. And then I'm going to bring n over 5 down, and then those to cancel. So that was the inverse of adding. I'm sorry, the inverse of subtraction. So now for my final step, I want to do the inverse to multiplication or division. This is division. So the inverse is going to be to multiply. So I'm going to multiply this side by 5. And if I multiply that side by 5, I have to multiply that side by 5. Those cancel, where I just have an n. And then 5 times 5 is 25. I would take that answer, or you could flip it over, put the n first, reverse the inequality, and then put the 25. Okay, one more problem, and then we're done. Here we go. Okay, the first thing I would want to do here is I would want to get rid of this 4 on the bottom of this fraction. So since you cannot divide 4 into these evenly, I am instead going to do the inverse of division, and I'm going to multiply this side times 4. That allows me to cancel it out. So over here, I just have 14x minus 14. Here's the thing. If I multiply this side of the inequality by 4, I'm going to have to multiply this side of the inequality by 4 also. And I do that by using the distributive. So 4 times 4x is 16x. And 4 times a minus 7 is a minus 28. And then you just bring down the inequality sign. Okay, and my next step here is to combine like terms on either side. I can't combine those, that's a variable and that doesn't, and I can't that. So I'm going to go to the next step, and that one is to move all the variables to the same side. Okay, I'm going to move the smaller one, it's positive, so I'm going to subtract 14x from both sides. That gives me 2x minus 28. It's greater than or equal to, those cancel, and I have a negative 14. All right, we're almost done here. So now I want to do the inverse of adding, and I'm going to the inverse of adding or subtracting, sorry. I have subtracting 28, so I'm going to do the inverse, and I'm going to add 28 to both sides. Those cancel. I bring down the 2x, bring down the inequality sign. A negative 14 plus 28 is a positive 14. And my last and final step is to do the inverse of multiplication or division. This is multiplication, so the inverse is to divide. And so I end up getting x is greater than or equal to 7. And there is my final answer.